Helen, where are my children? They went to play. They will come back. Play where, Helen? It has been 6 hours. Sandra, please, let go. Small children wander, that is all. I saw them, Sandra. A man carried them into a car by the junction. A car, Helen. You told me they went to play. I do not know what you are talking about.
Sandra had her bag halfway out of the taxi when the gate man told her the children were not inside. She had been gone 4 hours, not 4 days, and already something in the compound felt wrong. The gate stood open, the veranda was empty. Her sister Helen sat on a plastic chair, peeling melon seeds as though nothing in the world had moved. "Where are my children, Helen?" Sandra asked, dropping her bag by the gate, her chest already tight with a fear she could not yet name. Helen did not look up. "They went to play near the junction. They will come back." It had been 4 hours since Sandra left for the airport that morning, racing to catch a flight to Lagos for an interview that could change her family's life forever. She had begged Helen, her only sister in Port Harcourt, to watch her son Daniel and her daughter Ada for the day. Helen had agreed too quickly, too sweetly, and Sandra, blinded by hope for the future, had not noticed the strange brightness in her sister's eyes. By evening, the brightness had turned into something else. Sandra returned from the airport with a job offer letter clutched in her hand, the kind of offer that could lift her family out of struggle forever. She walked into the compound expecting her children to run to her, expecting Daniel's loud laughter and Ada's small arms around her neck. Instead, she found silence and a sister who would not meet her eyes. 4 hours, Helen, Sandra said again, her voice rising. "Which child plays for 4 hours without coming home?" "You are too dramatic," Helen muttered, still peeling her seeds. "Children play, they forget time." But Sandra knew her children. Daniel was 7 and never strayed past the second gutter. Ada was 5 and cried if she could not see her mother's shadow. Something cold moved through Sandra's chest, the kind of cold that comes before disaster announces itself properly. She ran through the street calling their names. Neighbors came out one by one, shaking their heads, until an old woman named Mama Ngozi stepped out from her doorway with her wrapper still tied loosely at her waist. "I saw them all. A man carried them into a car by the junction. I thought you sent him." Sandra's knees went weak. She turned back to the compound, back to her sister, and for the first time in her life, she looked at Helen the way one looks at a stranger. "A car, Helen," Sandra said slowly. "You told me they went to play." Helen's hand stopped moving. I do not know what that old woman is saying. But guilt does not hide well on a familiar face, and Sandra had grown up reading every shift in her sister's expression since they were girls sharing one mattress in their mother's house in Aba. She saw it now, the flicker, the swallow, the refusal to hold her gaze. That night, Sandra did not sleep. She sat outside the police station in Port Harcourt until a tired officer finally agreed to open a file, warning her that children wander off all the time and usually return by morning. Morning came, her children did not. She called Victor at midnight, her voice breaking apart with every word. "Victor, I cannot find Daniel and Ada. I left them with Helen and now nobody can tell me where they are." Victor's voice on the other end went silent for a long moment before he spoke. "I am booking the first flight back. Sandra, listen to me. Do not collapse. Stay strong until I reach you." She wanted to collapse. Every part of her wanted to lie on the floor of that police station and scream until her chest emptied itself from fear. But she remembered her grandmother's voice from childhood, telling her that a mother's strength is borrowed from her children, and she would need every borrowed ounce of it to bring them home. By dawn, word had spread through the extended family. Aunties called with theories. Uncles called with blame disguised as concern, asking why she had left her children with Helen, of all people, as though Helen's name alone should have warned her. Sandra ignored the blame. She needed answers, not opinions. By the second day, the story had changed 3 times in Helen's mouth. First, the children went to play. Then a neighbor offered to walk them to buy bread. Then Helen claimed she had stepped inside for only a minute, just a minute, and when she came back outside, they were gone. Sandra listened to each version and felt something inside her harden into resolve. She thought of her husband, Victor, who had called from Lagos, confused why she was not picking his calls, not yet knowing his children were missing. She thought of the interview letter still folded in her bag, the dream that suddenly felt small and far away. Nothing mattered until her children were found. On the third day, Sandra returned to the junction where Mama Ngozi had seen the car. She found a young tricycle rider named Emeka who remembered the vehicle clearly because it was unusual for that side of town, a black Camry with a cracked side mirror. Emeka remembered something else too. A man had paid him to look away and forget what he saw. "Who paid you?" Sandra asked, pressing a folded note into her palm more than he had been offered to stay silent. Emeka hesitated, then spoke. "A man called Chooks. He does errands for people. I have seen him with your sister before at the market." The ground seemed to tilt beneath Sandra's feet. Her own sister. The same Helen who braided her hair as a child, who cried at her wedding, who held Ada the day she was born and called her my own daughter too. That same Helen had paid a stranger to take her children away. Sandra did not confront Helen immediately. Instead, she went quiet, the way a storm goes quiet before it breaks a roof apart. She tracked down Chooks through Emeka's description, following him for 2 days until she discovered where the children were being kept, a small rented room in Eleme, far from anyone who knew their faces. A woman there had been paid to feed them and keep them calm, telling them their mother would come soon. When Sandra finally broke through that door and saw Daniel and Ada huddled together on a thin mattress, something broke and rebuilt itself inside her at the same time. The room smelled of stale rice and candle smoke. Ada's small dress was crumpled and stained, and Daniel sat with his arm protectively around his sister, trying to be brave, the way he had seen his father be brave. The woman minding them froze in the corner, too afraid to run, too afraid to speak. Sandra held her children so tightly that Ada cried out not from fear, but from how hard her mother's arms refused to let go. She pressed her face into their hair and breathed them in as though 3 days had been 3 years. "Mommy, Auntie Helen said you sent us," Daniel whispered against her shoulder. "She said you are coming back for us and we should not cry." Sandra's tears fell freely then, but underneath the relief was a fury she had never known herself capable of holding. She thanked Emeka with everything she had on her, called Victor with a voice that finally allowed itself to shake, and waited for the police officer she had brought along to handle the woman and the room exactly as the law required. She learned the full truth slowly, piecing it together from Chooks, who broke easily once he realized the police were already involved. Helen had not done this for money. She had done it from something far older and far uglier. Jealousy that had grown quietly for years, fed in silence at every family gathering where Sandra's name was praised and Helen's was politely avoided. Jealousy of Sandra's marriage to a man who adored her, who called every evening just to hear her laugh, while Helen's own husband had grown distant and cold, long before their marriage finally cracked 2 years earlier. Jealousy of Sandra's children, healthy and bright, full of questions and laughter, while Helen's own womb had given her nothing but disappointment after 3 painful losses she never spoke about at family functions. Jealousy, finally, of an interview letter that promised the one thing Helen felt she would never have again, a future moving forward, while she stayed behind, peeling melon seeds on a borrowed chair in her sister's compound. Helen had paid Chooks to hide the children for 1 day only, just long enough to make Sandra miss her flight, panic publicly, and return home broken in front of her husband, in front of the family, in front of everyone who once called Sandra the lucky one. Helen wanted Sandra humbled, wanted her brought low enough to need rescuing, the way Helen herself had needed rescuing for years without anyone noticing. She never expected Sandra to find the trail so fast or to refuse to break at all. The family gathering had already been planned for that weekend, a small housewarming for their uncle's retirement, the kind of event where every relative in Port Harcourt would be present. Sandra arrived with her children clean, fed, and laughing again, holding Victor's hand, who had flown back the moment he heard what happened. Helen arrived smiling, greeting elders, accepting their blessings, acting as though nothing in the world had shifted. She did not know Sandra had already recorded Chuksi's full confession on her phone. Every word, every name, every payment. The room was full of music and laughter when Sandra stood and asked everyone gently, kindly, to listen to something for just 1 minute. Some of the aunties laughed, thinking she wanted to make a toast. Their uncle, the celebrant, raised his cup toward her with a proud smile, not knowing what was coming. Sandra played the recording for the entire family to hear. Chuksi's voice naming Helen clearly, describing the payment, describing the plan to teach Sandra a lesson she will not forget in a hurry. The music in the room did not return. Spoons stopped midway to mouth. A glass cup slipped from someone's hand and shattered against the tiled floor, but nobody moved to clean it. Their uncle, the man being celebrated that day, rose slowly from his chair and asked Helen directly, in front of everyone, if it was true. "Helen, answer me," he said, his voice low and dangerous, in a way the family had never heard from him. "Is this your voice they are describing? Did you take this woman's children?" Helen's mouth opened and closed without sound. Her eyes searched the room for one face that might rescue her, and found none. Her husband, sitting 2 seats away, stood and walked out of the house without a single word, his silence louder than any accusation could have been. By the next morning, what happened in that room had already traveled through every family phone line in Port Harcourt. Helen's name, once spoken with affection at every gathering, became something neighbors whispered about with narrowed eyes. Her husband filed for separation within the week, telling anyone who asked that he could no longer trust a woman capable of such cruelty toward innocent children. The market women who once respected her stopped greeting her warmly, turning their faces away whenever she passed their stalls. The community she had tried to manipulate Sandra in front of had turned fully and permanently against her instead. Sandra did not celebrate Helen's downfall. She did not need to. She simply held her children closer each night, grateful in a way that words could not fully carry, checking on them twice before she allowed herself to sleep, and accepted the job offer that once seemed impossible to chase while fighting for her family's safety. The company in Lagos, moved by the story that had reached even their offices, held the position open for her without question.
Victor stood beside her through every step, holding Daniel on his shoulders on the morning they finally moved into their new home. Ada's small hand wrapped tightly in his, a family that jealousy had tried to tear apart and failed completely to break. Months later, when people in the community spoke of that housewarming, they no longer remembered the retirement being celebrated. They remembered only one thing: the day a sister's jealousy was exposed in front of everyone she had once smiled beside, and the day a mother proved, without raising her voice or her hand, that love, when tested by betrayal, does not break. It only grows sharper, fiercer, and impossible to silence. Comment trigger: if your own sister did this to you, would you ever speak to her again? Or is that bond broken forever? Drop your answer below. If this story touched you, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs it today. And drop a comment. We want to hear from you. God bless you.